Hello, I'm Ron Newberry, and I'm the pastor of the Mansfield and Hackett United Methodist Churches. On behalf of our two congregations, we invite you to attend one of these services on Easter Sunday if you do not already have a church home. Hackett's worship service begins at 9:30, Mansfield's begins at 11, and we invite you to choose and come to worship with us on this wonderful day we call Easter. I would like to say a word about Easter. There are those who say that Christians should not celebrate Easter as it is a pagan holiday. It celebrates the death of winter and the rebirth of the earth in spring. That is not the case. In the early 8th century, a church historian who is called the Venerable Bede wrote a book, The Ecclesiastical History of the English People. It is Bede's contention that the word Easter comes from an Anglo-Saxon spring goddess, Estore. He says it is derived from the fertility goddess, Ishtar. Others contend that the word is Germanic in origin, Osteron, which is again a pagan festival. And those who say we shouldn't celebrate Easter do so because of that. If I was grading a history paper, I would give them half a point, for they made a point about the name Easter, but certainly not about the celebration itself. Those who say that have not done their theological or biblical homework. The early Christians were celebrating what we call Easter centuries before the word was even used in ecclesiastical circles. The celebration of the death and resurrection of Jesus is the oldest celebration in the church. It predates Lent, Advent, and other Christian festivals by decades. But they did not call it Easter. They called it by a more biblical name. The early Christians used the word Pesh, which is the Hebrew word for Passover. The Latin speaking church used the word Pascha, meaning the same thing. There is little or no debate that Jesus and all four of the gospel writers want us to understand that his death is directly tied to the Passover. His death is a new and better Passover. We see this in 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 7, where Paul would write, "Our paschal lamb, Christ, has been sacrificed." And this reading was taken from the New Revised Standard Version of the Bible. The New Revised Standard Version Updated Edition also uses the word paschal there. The New International Version, the New Living Translation, and the Revised English Bible and others use the phrase Passover Lamb. So it would say, Christ, our Passover Lamb, has been sacrificed. This Christian festival has nothing to do with paganism. So when is Easter to be celebrated? The events of the death and resurrection of Jesus, especially the death of Jesus, took place on the 14th and 15th of Nisan in the Jewish calendar, which would be exactly this time of the year. And as you know, Christians have never been able to agree on some important things. The two things Jesus told us to do, baptism and Holy Communion, we can't agree on. In baptism, who's eligible to be baptized? Infants or professing adults only? How much water is necessary? A sprinkling or full immersion? On the Eucharist or Holy Communion, do you have to be a member of a particular church or a particular denomination, or can any baptized Christian partake of the elements in Holy Communion? Since we can't agree on those very important issues, it comes as no surprise that we cannot agree on minor issues such as when the Easter celebration should be observed. We have to understand that the Jewish calendar is a lunar calendar. It is based on the moon and not the sun. And because of that shorter calendar, dates move around. That's true not only of Passover, it's also true of Easter. Now, there were those in the early days of the church, and there are a few pockets in the Middle East where people still believe this, that Easter should be celebrated on the 14th of Nisan, no matter what day of the week it falls on. If it falls on Wednesday this year, that's fine. If it falls on Thursday next year or Saturday the year after that, it doesn't matter, because it has to be on the 14th of Nisan, because that's when Jesus was crucified. Those people are called Quadracinians, or simply the 14ers, because they believe it has to be on the 14th. Others, and I think this is a majority of the Christian church, wants Easter to be celebrated on the first day of the week. Now, in the Jewish calendar, as in our calendar, the first day of the week is Sunday. It gets a little complicated as to figure out what day this event falls on, not only for Easter, but for Passover as well. So a fairly complicated formula has been made over the centuries, and this is how the dates of Passover and Easter are calculated. Simply put, Easter is to be celebrated on the Sunday after the first full moon of the spring equinox, anywhere between March 22nd and April 25th. Now, if you remember your astronomy, the equinox there are 2 days that are equinoxes. There's a spring and a fall equinox. That's the day when the sun is directly over the equator, and the length of day and the length of night are exactly the same. So this year, Easter is on April 5th, which is after the first full moon, which is this coming Wednesday, April 1st, after the spring equinox, which was on March the 20th. So that's the reason Easter is on April 5 this year. In most years, Easter is celebrated on the Sunday following Passover. But there are times when Passover and Easter coincide because of that lunar calendar. The name Easter may be of pagan origin, but the celebration of the death and resurrection of Jesus is certainly not. We have used the name Easter for so long, it would be impossible to switch to a more biblical name like Pesh or Paschal. I hope this may clarify, maybe muddy a little bit, the dates of Easter. And if you haven't found a church home, we invite you either to Hackett or to Mansfield this Sunday. Have a good day.